The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the man from Leng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am continuing with my reviews of the City of Archives Mythos pack. We are looking at the Rogue cards in the 4th Mythos pack in the Forgotten Age cycle. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. Rogues receive an evade action and another way to generate resources in this Mythos pack, so with that in mind, let's get started. The first rogue card in the pack is Slip Away. It's a 2-cost event with intellect and agility skill icons and the trick trait. It has the game text Evade. Add your intellect to your skill value for this evasion attempt. If you succeed by 2 or more and the evaded enemy is non-elite, it does not ready during the next upkeep phase. Evade actions have become slightly more dangerous with the appearance of enemies with the alert keyword in the Forgotten Age cycle, so a card like Slip Away that lets rogues and off-class rogues boost their skill values during an evade action is a welcome addition to the card pool. Now, when I reviewed the Arkham Horror LCG card pool, I was somewhat surprised to discover that cards with evasion with benefits are fairly rare in the rogue class. Most of the cards that fall into this category are either mystic cards such as Blinding Light and Mists of Rillier, or survivor cards such as Bait and Switch or Cunning Distraction. The only 2 cards I could find in the rogue class were Stealth, a rogue asset from the Path to Carcosa Deluxe expansion, and Suggestion, a rogue asset from the Black Stars Rise Mythos pack. I've never bothered playing Stealth in any of my decks, but I have seen Suggestion do some very good work in a couple of Akachi decks, including the one that was played during Arkham Knights when we took on the Path to Carcosa campaign that was played by Mr. Trench. The Slip Away is a good fit in a Finn Edwards deck since the bootlegger has a total skill value of 8 when he plays the card. That is a very big plus if you want the benefit that comes with succeeding by 2. Skids O'Toole and Wendy Adams have a skill value of 7 with Slip Away, which is still pretty decent, while Jenny Barnes and Safina Rousseau, among others, bring up the rear with a skill value of 6. In the unlikely event that Leo Anderson needs to evade an enemy, Slip Away could certainly help since he'll have a skill value of 4, which is a lot better than his native agility of 1. Now, I don't see Leo Anderson mucking about with a card like Slip Away very often, but he's certainly unlikely to succeed by 2. But his odds of evading an enemy are certainly higher with Slip Away than without. So it may be worth a look for certain situations. It's important to note here that Leo Anderson can take Adaptable, so it's quite easy for him to sub this card in and out of his deck if necessary. If you're experimenting with Slip Away, you may also want to consider throwing Lola Santiago into the mix, since she adds 2 to the total skill value when you use Slip Away. Again, Finn Edwards rises to the top of the investigator heap here since he can play both cards and generate a skill value of 10, and that should be more than enough to succeed by 2 most of the time. Now, Slip Away's benefit reminds me a little bit of Bait and Switch from the Dunwich Legacy Deluxe expansion, in that both cards will buy you some time after you evade an enemy. Slip Away is better than Bait and Switch as long as you can succeed by 2. Preventing an enemy from readying during the upkeep phase is a very strong play, since that enemy won't move and or attack for at least 2 rounds. That is a significant amount of time when the typical scenario can last anywhere from 10 to 12 rounds. Now, Bait and Switch does move an enemy to another location, which is okay. However, if that enemy has the Hunter keyword, it can still move and attack that round unless you put some distance between that investigator and the enemy. The nice thing about Bait and Switch is that you don't need to succeed by 2 to get the benefit of the card, but you also don't get the bonus to your skill value either. So there are some pros and cons to playing either card. As much as I like Slip Away's effect, I really wish that it prevented enemies from readying until the end of the round rather than just the upkeep phase. While I was playing Finn in the Iron Man during Arkham Knights a couple months ago, I often ran into the situation where I would evade an enemy with Finn and then draw a card with pickpocketing, and more often than not, the card that I drew was Finn's signature weakness, Caught Red-Handed. And if you're familiar with Caught Red-Handed, it will ready the enemy and forcing me to evade it again. Slip Away does work very well with Finn. However, it doesn't prevent the enemy from readying if Finn draws Caught Red-Handed, which is a little bit annoying. Slip Away is quite good if you can succeed by 2 and lock an enemy down for a couple turns. Finn is the most obvious candidate to play Slip Away since he has a high intellect and agility values, and he's good friends with Lola Santiago, who can boost his skill value to absurd heights. I believe that's also Finn who's pictured on the card, so I know that Fantasy Flight likes to give players hints about which cards work well with which investigators, and certainly this card has Finn written all over it. However, I could see experimenting with this card in other investigators as well. That said, I doubt I would consider playing this card unless I knew that I could succeed by 2 reliably to lock down an enemy. Slip Away's evade bonus is great, but the card's application is fairly limited in that it is only really useful during evade actions, and it costs you a card slot and 2 resources to boot. If you're really worried about succeeding on evade actions, you may want to consider alternatives to Slip Away, such as one of the rogue talents, since those talents, if you spend the 2 resources, they can help you on evade checks, but they can also help you on other actions as well. So they're a little bit more versatile than Slip Away. That said, if you're playing Finn or one of the other rogues, I think Slip Away is a very interesting option to look at if you are having to evade a lot of enemies. If evading is not your role, say you're playing a Skids deck that is more focused on combat, then I don't think you're going to need a card like Slip Away. The second rogue card in the pack is Payday. It's a free event that costs 1 experience point. It has the Illicit and Faded traits. It has the game text, gain 1 resource for each action you performed this turn, including this one. If it is your turn, end your turn. Now, several classes seem to be receiving cards that are similar to Emergency Cash in this cycle. Survivors received Take Heart in Heart of the Elders, while Rogues and Mystics receive Payday and Sacrifice, respectively, in this pack. Payday has the potential to be a lot better than Emergency Cash in the right rogue build. It's relatively easy for investigators such as Skids O'Toole and Finn Edwards to take 4 actions per round with their special abilities. If you throw in a few cards that generate extra actions, such as Leo DeLuca, Quick Thinking, and Police Badge, Payday could easily net you 5 or 6 resources on the final action of your turn. If you go all in generating extra actions with cards such as Ace in the Hole or Borrowed Time from Shattered Aeons, you could have 1 mega turn where Payday generates resources in the double digits. That is extremely good for a card that will only set you back 1 experience point. If you're playing a rogue or off-class rogue capable of taking 4 or 5 actions per turn, it really makes good economic sense to replace or supplement your Emergency Cash with Payday. Payday synergizes with rogues better than Emergency Cash thanks to the Illicit trait. Now, the Illicit trait hasn't been as well developed as, say, Relic or Spell, but there are still a few tricks that you can pull off. Finn's signature event, Smuggled Goods, lets him search either the discard pile or top 9 cards of his deck for an Illicit card and draw it. Finn can tutor up Payday with Smuggled Goods, which is something he cannot do with Emergency Cash. Fence, a 3-cost rogue asset released in Threads of Fate, also synergizes with Payday. Now, typically you need to spend an action to play Payday on your turn, but if you've got Fence in play, you can exhaust it to make Payday fast, so you can play it during the player window after your final action. If you're playing Skids, for example, you could take 4 actions using his special ability, then use Fence to play Payday during the player window before his turn ends. That way he doesn't have to waste one of his precious actions playing Payday, and he still gets all the benefits. Now, Skids will still need to play Fence at some point in order to do this, and I'm not entirely convinced there are enough cards with the Illicit trait to warrant playing Fence yet, but I think the time will come when Fence is going to be the centerpiece of a viable deck archetype. Payday is a really solid card. It doesn't really do anything fancy, it just generates resources, but then again, it doesn't really need to either. As a campaign progresses, rogues need a lot of resources to fuel their cards, such as Streetwise and Lola Santiago, and Payday helps them do that a little more efficiently than Emergency Cash, as long as they have some way to generate extra actions. When I was playing Finn at Arkham Knights, I sort of regretted that I didn't add this card to my deck, because as the campaign continued, I found that resources were extremely tight, and I think Payday would have alleviated some of that pressure if I had played it in conjunction with Emergency Cash. So I expect this card to crop up in a lot of rogue decks moving forward. Those are the rogue cards in A City of Archives. I like both of them, although I'm likely to play Payday a lot more than Slip Away. Slip Away has the potential to lock down an enemy, but you need to succeed by 2 first, which isn't easy unless you're generating extremely high skill values like Finn Edwards. Otherwise, you're going to be spending a card and 2 resources for a slightly better evade action, and I'm not convinced Slip Away is worth it just for that benefit of locking down an enemy is really good, and I would want to be able to do that if I'm playing Slip Away. Payday, on the other hand, is fantastic if you're an investigator who's capable of generating extra actions. I know at Arkham Knights I saw several players who were playing that sort of deck archetype and generating actions in the double digits on their turn, and Payday slips into that sort of deck very smoothly. Finn and Skids are the obvious standouts here among the investigators, but other rogues can benefit from Payday as well, as long as they're playing some of the other rogue cards that generate extra actions, or they're experimenting with the Illicit trait. In hindsight, as I mentioned, I should have been playing this card in my Arkham Knights deck, and it certainly would have helped smooth out the resource curve a little bit. And so really good stuff here for rogues. That's going to do it for my review of the rogue cards in the City of Archives. If you agree or disagree, make sure you leave a comment down below. If you have any questions, you can contact me at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.